Welcome in, everyone. And a huge welcome specifically to you, the listener joining us today.
Yeah, glad to have you here.
We're really looking forward to getting into this one with you
Mm.
because today's mission for this deep dive is to sift through a pretty dense but really fascinating stack of sources we've compiled.
It's a very comprehensive stack.
You're right. We are looking at website manifestos, highly detailed course methodology pages, real-world clinical testimonials, and even a selection of YouTube transcripts.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these materials center around a highly structured system, a methodology called Manifesting Your Future. It was developed by a man named Rob Mitchell.
Right, who is an
Yeah.
educator, an advisor, and a non-denominational minister.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, so if you follow this space at all, you already know the conversation around manifestation has evolved a lot over the last few years.
Dramatically.
Yeah, we are moving far away from the era of that 4 a.m. hustle culture, right, where you just grind until you drop.
Mm.
And we're moving toward a much bigger focus on nervous system regulation. So if you are completely tired of self-help techniques that feel like a second full-time job,
Which is most of them, honestly.
seriously, if you're tired of that, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Yeah.
The core premise we're looking at today is about ditching the hustle and learning how to align the mind so that progress actually feels effortless.
And it's a necessary evolution. For a long time, the prevailing wisdom was all about forcing outcomes, sheer willpower. But to give you some context on the sheer scale of the material we are analyzing today, the numbers are, they're quite telling.
Yeah, lay out those numbers because they surprise me.
Over 50,000 people have completed Mitchell's coursework.
Wow.
Yeah. And we aren't talking about a brief weekend retreat or, a motivational pamphlet. This is a comprehensive, roughly 10.5-hour self-paced program.
10.5 hours.
Right. And it's been tested and refined over several decades. When you look at the clinical data and the underlying methodology, it becomes clear that this is framed entirely as a user's manual for the mind.
A user's manual. I love that framing.
It's a highly analytical, step-by-step process of understanding the mechanics of how internal alignment naturally drives external results. It is not magic, it's mechanics.
Okay, let's unpack this because the first major theme in these sources addresses our modern learning environment head-on. The material takes a really firm stance on the culture of information bombardment. Just think about your average day. You open your phone, you check your feeds, and you are immediately hit with influencers, thought leaders, and experts.
Constantly.
Constantly telling you what to do. They prescribe exactly what career path to take, what your morning routine absolutely must look like to be successful, and essentially what your entire life script should be.
And Mitchell's methodology highlights a critical psychological flaw in that cultural setup. It draws a very distinct line between advice and understanding. The text argues that advice operates purely at the level of description. Someone is simply describing the byproduct of their own successful life to you.
Oh.
Understanding, on the other hand, is what actually creates a life.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Isn't advice practically the backbone of learning? I mean, if someone successful tells me exactly what they did to get where they are, why shouldn't I just copy their routine? It seems like a perfectly logical shortcut.
It does seem logical on the surface, but the sources point out the psychological mismatch that happens when you try to apply it. The manifesto argues that advice frequently generates anxiety rather than clarity.
Anxiety instead of clarity. How so?
Well, when someone hands you a rule for success,
Right.
and you try to force it onto your own life without internalizing the why behind it, your nervous system often resists it.
Oh, because it doesn't fit your actual life.
Exactly. Nothing actually changes except your stress levels go up because now you feel like you're failing at this brand new metric.
That makes total sense.
The underlying premise is that if you repeat a positive affirmation or a piece of advice that doesn't stem from your own authentic understanding, your mind is going to quietly but firmly reject it. Genuine change has to come from insight, not from just imitating someone else's descriptive reality.
I want to ask you, the listener, directly for a moment. Have you ever felt pressured by a piece of advice that, instead of helping, just made you feel like you were falling behind?
Like everyone else had the secret playbook.
Yeah, exactly. Like you were the only one struggling to run the plays. The coursework calls out the antidote to this dynamic, which it refers to as self-authorship.
A great concept.
It is. Self-authorship is defined as the vital practice of never letting third parties, whether that's culture, algorithms, or authority figures, plant unexamined beliefs into your mind. You just can't live someone else's script and expect it to feel authentic to your own nervous system.
That is a crucial distinction right there. Beliefs derived from external authority rarely produce sustainable behavioral change. The entire system we're looking at isn't designed to tell the listener what to think.
Right. It's not giving you a new script.
No, it's engineered to show you how your mind operates. It gives you the tools to discover what is true for yourself. It is an entirely different paradigm of self-development.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of how this 10.5-hour manifesting your future process works. Rather than adopting a brand new philosophy or, memorizing a new set of rules to layer on top of your existing thoughts.
Which would just be more advice.
Exactly. The methodology is entirely about clearing out the existing junk. The sources outline 3 foundational phases of internal alignment.
And these phases are strictly sequential. That's important. They deal with the most volatile layers of our psychology first before moving to higher order thinking.
Right, so phase 1 is emotional clearing. The course material explains that unresolved emotions, specifically things like fear, anger, guilt, sadness, grief, and hurt, create tangible internal resistance.
They act like a roadblock.
Yeah, they keep the nervous system locked in a constant state of low-grade reactivity.
What's interesting is how the course approaches clearing this. It doesn't ask the user to engage in endless narrative therapy.
You mean like recounting every past trauma to understand it intellectually?
Right, it skips that. Instead, this phase focuses on neutralizing the emotional charge at a level below conscious awareness.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. Because if your nervous system is biologically locked in a reactive fight-or-flight state, no amount of positive thinking or forced visualization is going to override that baseline physiological response. You have to discharge the emotional static first.
Wow, okay. And then once that baseline is neutralized, the methodology moves into phase 2, which is belief release. And the course manual uses a phrase here that I think perfectly encapsulates the shift. It describes this phase as creating mental clarity instead of mental management.
Mental management is exhausting.
So exhausting. It's the act of constantly policing your thoughts, trying to block out the negative ones, forcing yourself to stay on track. But this phase aims to simply release limiting beliefs without forcing positive replacements in their place.
I looked really closely at the clinical framework for this because it breaks a major rule of traditional self-help.
It really does.
Most self-improvement models require you to immediately fill a void with a forced positive affirmation. But this system posits that if you remove the limiting belief, clarity naturally fills the space.
But let me push back on that for a second,
Oh.
because it sounds almost too passive.
Okay.
If a person just unhooks from a negative belief
Hmm.
and doesn't actively replace it with a positive one, doesn't that leave a dangerous psychological vacuum? Like, how does someone avoid just sliding right back into their old comfortable habits?
It's a valid concern, and it's exactly why the methodology frames it around clarity. Let's look at an everyday example to break this down.
Sure.
Imagine you have a deeply ingrained belief that you are terrible at public speaking. Every time you have to give a presentation, your mind spirals.
We've all been there.
Right. Traditional mental management would tell you to stand in front of a mirror and chant, "I am a powerful, confident speaker."
Right. Power poses and affirmations.
Exactly. But your brain knows you don't actually believe that. So the friction remains, the anxiety is still there, you're just trying to shout over it.
So what does releasing the belief actually look like in this system then?
Instead of shouting over the anxiety, the coursework guides you to examine the architecture of the belief itself. How it was formed, usually from an inherited judgment or a past isolated failure, and unhook the emotional weight from it.
Okay.
When you drop the belief that I am inherently bad at public speaking, you don't magically become a world-class orator overnight,
Right.
but you do remove the internal dread.
Right.
The vacuum isn't filled with a forced delusion, it's filled with neutral clarity. You can step up to the podium and just deliver the information without the crippling physiological stress. The action becomes accessible because the friction is gone.
That makes perfect sense.
Mm.
You aren't forcing a new identity. You are just removing the obstacle blocking the task. And that naturally leads into phase 3, which is values alignment. The sources emphasize that values are the true engine of human motivation. However, when our values are conflicted, or more commonly, when they are inherited from our parents or societal expectations rather than actively chosen by us, making any kind of progress feels like dragging a boulder up a hill.
It is deeply inconsistent.
But when you audit those values and align them with what you genuinely want to create, taking action suddenly feels sustainable.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, The ultimate byproduct of moving sequentially through these three phases, clearing the unresolved emotions, releasing the limiting beliefs, and aligning the authentic values, is what the text calls deep presence.
Deep presence.
And they are careful to define this term. They are not talking about a fragile presence that requires you to constantly meditate or aggressively practice mindfulness throughout your day.
Right, they describe it as a baseline state.
Precisely, it happens automatically. The reason most people struggle to stay present isn't because they lack focus, it's because they have too much internal noise.
All that static.
When the unresolved emotions and conflicting beliefs that constantly pull you into the past or the future are removed, the mind rests naturally in the present moment. Your nervous system is calm, and your thinking is unclouded.
And this is where the system's definition of manifestation really crystallizes. Manifestation is not presented here as a conscious goal you chase or some sort of cosmic slot machine you try to hack by thinking hard enough.
No, not at all.
When your internal resistance dissolves, your decision-making simply becomes frictionless. Your focus sharpens. You start recognizing opportunities that were always there, but that you were too distracted to see. Therefore, manifestation is framed as a natural side effect of internal alignment.
You aren't aggressively trying to manifest a better career. A better career trajectory naturally unfolds because you have stopped actively getting in your own way.
That idea of effortless alignment and internal resonance actually bridges perfectly into another concept we found in their materials. We reviewed several transcripts from Mitchell's YouTube channel, and there's one video that uses a fascinating analogy regarding how we process music.
Oh, yeah.
This one gets really interesting.
The music metaphor is arguably one of the strongest explanatory models they use.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
The video discusses the psychology of why we love music. It argues that music isn't merely entertainment, it is exposure.
Exposure.
Yeah. The reason we connect so deeply with certain artists isn't just because they wrote a catchy melody or clever lyrics. It's because those artists are giving us a direct, unfiltered pathway to their inner world. They are sharing a profound human experience, and we feel it on a visceral level.
What's compelling here is the psychological mechanism the methodology draws from this. The transcript points out that you can only recognize that greatness or feel that incredible emotional depth in an artist's music because that exact same depth already lives inside of you.
That is so powerful.
It is. You fundamentally cannot perceive, understand, or resonate with a frequency or a depth that you do not possess the capacity for.
That is a profound shift in perspective. It implies that if you can recognize brilliance in someone else, it's proof that the architecture for that brilliance exists in your own mind.
It fundamentally rewrites how we view learning and self-development. The text explicitly states, knowledge cannot be given. You cannot forcefully hand someone understanding or self-worth.
You have to find it yourself.
Right. The purpose of this entire 10.5-hour system isn't to put something new into the user. It is purely designed to help the listener recognize the capacity they already possess, the abundance, the clarity, the potential. It is all already residing in the nervous system, waiting to be accessed once the internal clutter is cleared away.
That shifts the entire burden of growth. Instead of feeling the anxiety of needing to go out and acquire greatness from gurus and experts, your only job is to uncover what is already there. And what's fascinating is that this isn't just modern theory. The sources detail the origin story of how this system was built, and it is rooted in decades of real-world clinical application.
Yes, going way back.
The history begins back in 1979. Rob Mitchell started with one central driving question. Why do some individuals change quickly and permanently, while others struggle for decades despite doing everything supposedly right?
It is the defining question in behavioral psychology, and the evolution of how Mitchell answered it is quite revealing.
Yeah, how did it start?
Well, initially, this methodology wasn't a scalable course. It was incredibly intensive, multi-hour, one-on-one session work, and the results were apparently so striking that it drew the attention of the medical community.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Psychiatrists, psychologists, and high-level business leaders actually began sending Mitchell their most difficult, stalled cases.
Oh.
These were people who had been utilizing conventional therapy and executive coaching for years with zero forward momentum.
Probably because the traditional methods were focused on mental management and coping strategies rather than deep internal alignment.
Exactly.
But obviously you can't scale multi-hour intensive one-on-one sessions without hitting a bottleneck. So the sources note that by 2018, this extensive body of work was structured into the current system, manifesting your future. The goal was to make it accessible to people before their lives became completely unmanageable, giving them that proactive user's manual for the mind.
And the evidence of this alignment in practice is heavily documented in the case studies and testimonials. What stands out to anyone reviewing the data is not just the success rate, but the wildly diverse areas of life this single system seems to impact.
Let's look at some of these specific anecdotes because they demonstrate exactly what we've been talking about. Take the case of Thomas Miller.
Right, the trader.
He applied this methodology to his financial life. He reported that his trading took a huge turn for the better. But more interestingly, he noted that the mechanism for this financial success was that he became deeply present and lost what he called his world self ego attachment.
The terminology there is important to clarify.
Let's pause on that, actually. What exactly does world self mean in this context? For the listener trying to grasp how that affects stock trading, how do we break that down?
Think of the world's self as the avatar you have built to navigate society's expectations. It's the version of you that is driven by ego, the need to look smart, the fear of failure, and the desire for external validation.
Got it.
In the context of trading stocks, if a person is operating from their world self, every market dip feels like a personal attack on their identity and intelligence.
Oh, that sounds incredibly stressful.
It is. They make reactive, emotional decisions to protect their ego. Shedding that world self means operating from an authentic, neutral core. Miller found inner peace, which removed the emotional static, naturally making him a highly objective, less reactive trader.
The internal calm directly stabilized his external financial decisions.
Precisely.
Another great example is Hisa Izumi Alston, who uses a highly visual analogy in her testimonial.
I love this one.
It's so good. She said her baseline state used to be like a high-strung horse that couldn't move forward because she was easily spooked by every little distraction in her periphery. After completing the 3 phases, she said it was like being given corrective horse blinders. She completely stopped procrastinating and stopped fretting over potential obstacles. Within just 2 weeks, she easily structured and launched a highly successful instructional workshop for her clients. The peripheral distraction just vanished.
The emotional charge that was keeping her nervous system in a reactive state was cleared.
Just cleared right out. And finally, there's the testimonial of Dr. Gregory Brown. He had successfully lost 60 pounds, which is a massive achievement, but he hit a frustrating wall and was completely stuck on the last 10 pounds.
Very common plateau.
Very common. Instead of hunting for a new extreme diet, he used this system to completely transform his underlying belief structure regarding health, weight, and his own identity. He described the process as quick, painless, and actually fun, and it allowed him to finally break through that plateau and reach his goal.
This raises an important question that we need to address. How can one single structured system resolve stock trading volatility, chronic procrastination, and stubborn physical weight loss?
Yeah, on the surface, those are 3 entirely distinct disciplines requiring vastly different skill sets and knowledge bases.
But the answer the sources provide is that the underlying roadblock is universal.
Universal.
Exactly. Whether it manifests as a financial block, a creative block, or a physical block, the root cause is always internal resistance. When you utilize the methodology to clear the emotional charge, unhook the limiting beliefs, and align the values, the specific external problem resolves itself. The external friction disappears because the internal system is finally functioning as a unified, cohesive whole.
It makes a complex problem look beautifully simple when you examine it from that angle.
It really does.
So what does this all mean? What is the core takeaway for you, the listener, as you process this information today? Distilling down all of these course manuals, transcripts, and clinical histories, the message is incredibly liberating. This is not about forcing yourself to think positively.
Bro.
It's not about memorizing affirmations that feel like lies to your own brain or hustling until your nervous system burns out. It is about understanding that you already possess the abundance, the depth, and the clarity you need to move forward.
It serves as an invitation to stop aggressively managing your mind and start actually understanding it, to clear the inherited rules that are bogging down your system, and to step into your own self-authorship. As the manifesto states, when alignment replaces effort, the future takes care of itself.
I think that is the perfect summation. And I want to leave you with one of the most resonant quotes from the methodology section of the site. It simply says, "The only thing that matters is what you do from this moment forward. You do not have to carry the heavy, unexamined beliefs of the past into tomorrow."
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a lingering thought to chew on. Based on everything we've unpacked regarding how the mind handles external directives, if we only experience anxiety when trying to force an inherited belief to work, What is one rule or piece of advice you've been exhaustingly trying to follow in your own life that might actually belong to someone else entirely?
That is a phenomenal question to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. Keep questioning those inherited rules, keep seeking true understanding, and above all, keep learning. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.